This video is going to talk you through section 10 in the Greenfoot chapter 9, and we are going to add the counter class finally. This is a portion of what you might use in your semester project to keep track of a score counter, and it will talk about how to use that score counter across different classes. Please read your textbook here, as it does contain some information. It does talk about the counter class, and the scenario is just a small collection of useful classes, and we will have to use the import class method in order to use that. Or you have to use import class when you want to use some of those helper classes. So we are going to fix the counter, the score counter, and we are going to do this by first adding a counter object in the space class. And to make the scoring work, the method then that we're going to use, there's going to be a count score, or I'm going to call it update score method, that we're going to add in the space class. And then once that is created, we're going to have to call that method from the asteroid class, because the asteroids are what are getting destroyed and where we are earning our points. So that's where we're going to start. If we take a look at our Greenfoot class, or our Greenfoot screen, we're going to go to the space class, and in the space class, we don't have to include any extra imports here at the time. I did already write some of this code, so the first thing that I added was a score counter. That's going to be an instance field, so it is a private variable, and it's of type counter, so it's a capital C on counter there because that's a class type, and then score counter is my local variable name for that. So I have a score counter variable, and as I scroll down, we take a look at the constructor. At this point in time, score counter here is where we create a new counter, and it's assigned score. That actually, I believe, was added in the initial code. I've made so many changes, I'm not sure what I've changed. So we're just looking at all the code to kind of double check what we got here. The create stars we did earlier. That's not going to involve anything that we have right now. Same with add asteroids. We did that earlier. We don't need to take a look at that right now. And we have a game over method. We will come back to that in a few minutes. But here's the method that we need to add. And so this method will update the score counter. Score counter is a counter object, and it uses the add method, which takes an integer parameter to add to the score. So we're going to update the score, we're going to send in an amount, and we have to call this add method. And at first, when I was working with this, I had to remind myself of all the methods that were in that counter class. So I came back to the counter class, and I had to review the methods that were in the counter class. And another way that you could do this is you can go to the documentation screen, and when you do that, it will show you the class. It will show you the methods that are available in the counter class: act, add, get value, set prefix, set value. And then it can add the details. So I want to use, or am using, the add method. So whenever you're using a class object, you can always go back to that documentation screen and check to see what the objects will be able to do and to check out their methods. And so we are using the add method, and what that does is it brings in an integer argument, score, and it adds it to the current score within the counter object. There isn't anything here in the counter object that we need to change or anything that we need to do here. All of this takes care of creating that counter, and so there isn't anything that we need to change there. That's all been pre-made. And so we should have right now that code should compile in our space class. It's not going to do anything yet because we haven't programmed what to do when we hit an asteroid. So now we're going to take a look at the asteroid class, and within the asteroid class, there isn't one thing I want you to pay attention here, we haven't looked at this a whole lot, is the stability factor. And we are going to create an update score method. And we're going to try to update the score based upon the stability of an asteroid. And basically the stability of the asteroid is based upon the size of the asteroid. And the original code that they have down here, not all of this is original. There's a few lines of code that I have added. I'm going to comment out this line because that's one that I added. And this line for right now. This was the original code that was in here. And what this does is it will decrease the damage, and I believe the damage is 30 every time an asteroid is hit. And then if the stability is less than or equal to 0, it breaks up, which means it basically gets removed from the world. Or depending on what the size is, it will play an explosion and it removes the object from the world based upon the size. If it isn't small enough, then it basically resizes itself here. And it also has some criteria for removing the object. So depending on the size, and there are different things that happen. And so one thing that we're going to work with here is I want to update the score, but the problem I come up with is that update score is in my space class. So what I need to do is to create a space object to work with. And that's what I did here. So I create a space object, space, and just with capital letter, lowercase space. And then I'm going to just get the world, but I have to cast it as a space in order to be able to work with it locally. And then I'm going to call the update method in space, and I'm going to add a score of 10. Every time that we do damage. If we try to run this, compile and run this, then we should, every time we hit an asteroid, theoretically, earn a score of 10 or something like that. And you know how well I play this game, so I'm going to position my asteroid to possibly get some points right away. And we could possibly try a proton wave if I get some asteroids within range. And proton wave, and then I want to die. And it will take me a long time to die. So I'm going to force myself to die. Now, if you look at the screen here, the score is at 999 yet, and that's something that we need to change yet. Because that was coded in earlier, we're going to take a look at the code in this. I'm not sure if it's in the space class or another class, so let's take a look. Actually, it's right here. So when we added that object to the world, the scoreboard, we had hard-coded in a 999. But we've now got this score counter that we're working with, and I want to be able to capture the score from the score counter. So score counter had an add method, but score counter also has a get target method. And so I'm going to call the score counter and get the target. And you might have to go back and look at that class to look at the code. I'm going to delete that as my comment as to what I needed to do. And don't forget to always kind of refresh and do your auto layout, Control-Shift-I. That should change the score, except I've got something spelled wrong, possibly, or too many parens. So if I take a look at score counter, the score counter class is here, and if I go back and look for the method that I need to capture the score, it's get value. And sometimes it's well worth your time to just copy that particular method name and bring it back to the other class that you were working in. I think we were in the space class, and instead of get target, I need to get value. Then it should compile and run, and we get some proton waves going, and see if I can move and die. We'll see how quickly I can die. Now my score matches here and with the score counter. That should wrap this up. I'm going to do one more video to help you with doing a little bit of debugging and editing the code for different scores for different size asteroids.